The fluorescent lights of the third-floor waiting room hummed a low, monotonous drone, a sound nurse Maya Patel had come to associate with exhaustion and quiet dread. From the relative safety of the nurse's station, she watched him. He was a mountain of a man, built from granite and leather, pacing a tight, three-step circuit in front of the window overlooking the rain-slick parking lot. His boots made no sound on the linoleum, a detail Maya found more terrifying than if he had been stomping. Silent rage was always worse. His name, according to the chart, was Marcus Thorne, but the nurses whispered a different name, one that matched the elaborate tattoo curling around his neck. Stone. He was the president of the Iron Hounds Motorcycle Club. His wife, Sarah, lay in room 304, a whisper away from death after a head-on collision with a drunk driver. For 6 hours, Stone had not sat down. He hadn't eaten, hadn't spoken to anyone but the doctor, and his replies then had been clipped, one-word growls. His men, a dozen more just like him, occupied the rest of the waiting room. They were a silent, grim-faced jury, their leather vests a uniform of quiet menace. They didn't speak either. They just watched, their collective gaze a heavy blanket over the entire floor. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she organized patient files, a nervous habit she'd never managed to kick. She was new, just 6 months out of nursing school, and still felt like an imposter playing dress-up in her pale blue scrubs. She was used to being overlooked, a quiet presence in the controlled chaos of the hospital. But tonight, the air was different. It was charged, heavy, like the moments before lightning splits the sky. Every beep of a monitor, every squeak of a cart's wheels, felt amplified. The call had come from the blood bank. Sarah Thorne's transfusion was ready. She had a rare blood type, O negative, and the hospital's supply was critically low. They had to source 2 units from a neighboring city. This was it. This was the moment that would either pull her back from the edge or push her over. Maya watched as charge nurse Albright, a woman with a spine made of steel and a voice that could curdle milk, took the call. Miss Albright was efficient, respected, and utterly terrifying. She ran her ward like a military operation, and Maya had already learned to make herself as small as possible in her presence. "Ready? Good. Send it up," Albright commanded into the phone, her voice sharp. She hung up and turned, her eyes scanning the station. They landed on Maya. "Patel, the Thorne transfusion is on its way. I want you to double-check the paperwork and prep the line. Dr. Evans will administer. Do not mess this up." "Yes, Ms. Albright." Maya's voice was barely a squeak. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was a critical task. A mistake with a blood transfusion wasn't just a write-up. It was a potentially fatal error. She took a deep, steadying breath, the sterile scent of antiseptic filling her lungs. She could do this. It was just a procedure, a series of steps she had practiced 100 times. A few minutes later, a tech arrived with a small, insulated cooler. Inside, nestled in ice, were 2 bags of dark red fluid, life in a plastic pouch. Maya took the cooler and the attached paperwork to a small, clean counter away from the main desk. Her hands were cold, but they had stopped shaking. Focus took over. She laid out the documents. Patient name, Sarah Thorne. Medical record number, 8801-T45. Blood type, O negative. She picked up the first bag. The label was pristine. It was attached to a form that matched the patient's chart. Everything looked perfect. She checked the expiration date. Good. She checked the blood type on the bag itself. O negative. Perfect. She moved to the second bag. It was identical in every way. Dark, precious fluid. She picked up the requisition form clipped to it. Patient name, Sarah Thorne. Blood type, O negative. She glanced at the label on the blood bag, her eyes tracing the printed letters and numbers. A routine verification, a final check. And then she saw it. Her breath hitched. Her entire body went cold. It was a single digit, a tiny, insignificant number that was wrong. The patient ID on the bag read 8801-T46. Sarah Thorne's number was 8801-T45. It was a simple mistake, a typo. It had to be. The name was right. The blood type was supposed to be right. But the label on this second bag, the one with the wrong ID, read A positive. A positive blood transfused into an O negative patient. Maya's training kicked in, a flood of horrifying facts. Hemolytic transfusion reaction. The recipient's antibodies would attack the donor blood cells, causing them to burst. It would trigger systemic shock, kidney failure, and almost certainly death. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a loaded gun. Maya's first thought was to find Ms. Albright. She grabbed the second bag and the paperwork, her hands now shaking for a different reason. She found the charge nurse at the main desk, barking orders at an orderly. "Ms. Albright?" Maya's voice was thin. Albright turned, her expression already annoyed. "What is it, Patel? I'm busy." "It's the blood for Mrs. Thorne," Maya said, holding up the bag. "There's a discrepancy. The ID number on this bag is T46, not T45, and the blood type is listed as A positive. Her chart says she's O negative." Ms. Albright snatched the bag and the form from her eyes scanning them with practiced speed. She frowned for a fraction of a second, then her face hardened into its usual mask of impatient authority. "It's a clerical error," she said, her tone dismissive. "The name is correct. The requisition form is for O negative. Someone in the lab probably just mislabeled the printout. The blood itself is correct. They wouldn't send the wrong type up." "But the bag is labeled A positive," Maya insisted, her voice trembling. "We can't give this to her. It could kill her." Albright's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. "Are you questioning my judgment, Nurse Patel? I've been doing this for 20 years. I know a paperwork error when I see one. The lab confirmed they were sending the O negative units we requested. This is just a typo on the sticker. Now I have a floor to run. Prep the O negative bag and have this one ready to go next. Dr. Evans is on his way." She shoved the bag back into Maya's hands and turned away, a clear dismissal. The conversation was over. Maya stood frozen, the cold plastic of the blood bag seeping into her skin. A typo. She wanted to believe it. It was the easiest thing to do. Trust the system. Trust the 20 years of experience Ms. Albright wielded like a weapon. To argue further would be insubordination. It would get her fired. In this town, with Albright's reputation, she'd be lucky to find a job cleaning bedpans. But her gut, a deep, primal part of her, was screaming. It wasn't a typo. The numbers, the letters on the bag, they felt definitive. They felt like a death sentence. She looked through the glass partition toward the waiting room. Stone had finally stopped pacing. He was slumped in a chair, his massive shoulders bowed, his head in his hands. He looked like a man who had lost everything. He was trusting them to save the one person he had left, and they were about to kill her with a bag of the wrong blood because of a typo. Have you ever had that feeling? That ice-cold certainty in your stomach when something is dangerously wrong, even when everyone around you is telling you to calm down, to ignore it? It's your instinct, your subconscious telling you to pay attention. What do you do when the cost of speaking up could be your entire future? Let me know what you would have done in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe, because what Maya does next is a lesson in courage you won't want to miss. Her mind raced. She could go over Albright's head, but to whom? The hospital administrator was at home asleep. Dr. Evans was a resident, barely older than her, and he trusted Albright implicitly. By the time she got anyone to listen, it would be too late. The transfusion was scheduled to start in less than 10 minutes. She felt a wave of nausea. She could just do what she was told. Prep the first bag, the correct one, and then the second. Let Dr. Evans administer it. It would be his name and Albright's on the final report. She would just be the nurse who followed orders. No one could blame her. No one except herself. She looked back at Stone, at his bowed head. She imagined the life draining out of his wife because she was too scared to lose her job. The image was so vivid, so horrifying, that it jolted her out of her paralysis. Fear of Ms. Albright was nothing compared to the fear of living with that. She had to do something. But what? She couldn't confront Albright again, and she couldn't burst into the waiting room and yell at a dozen grieving, volatile bikers. They'd think she was crazy. They wouldn't believe her. Her eyes darted around the nurse's station. A prescription pad sat on the counter. A pen lay next to it. An idea, desperate and terrifying, began to form in her mind. It was insane. It was unprofessional. It could get her arrested. It was the only option she had. Her hand, now steady with a strange, cold resolve, reached for the pad. She tore off a small sheet. The pen felt heavy in her fingers. She glanced up. No one was watching her. Albright was down the hall. The other nurses were busy with their own patients. She bent her head, shielding the paper with her body. She wrote quickly, her handwriting tight and jagged. They're giving her someone else's blood. Check bag, ID, room 304. She didn't sign it. There was no time. She folded the tiny piece of paper into a tight, small square, her fingers creasing it until it was no bigger than her thumbnail. Now came the hardest part. She had to get it to him. She tucked the note into the palm of her hand and stood up, her legs feeling like lead. She walked out from behind the nurse's station, forcing her gait to be casual, unhurried. Her destination was the staff coffee machine, which was strategically located down the hall, just past the entrance to the waiting room. She would have to walk right by them. Her heart felt like a wild bird trapped in her chest, beating its wings against her ribs. Every eye in the waiting room seemed to follow her. She could feel their collective stare, heavy and suspicious. She kept her own eyes fixed on the coffee machine, a beacon in a sea of leather and denim. Stone was still in the chair, his back to the hallway. His worn leather jacket was slung over the empty seat beside him. The pocket was right there. An open invitation. This was her one chance. She rehearsed the move in her head, a simple, clumsy accident. She drew level with his chair. Her breath caught in her throat. One of the other bikers, a wiry man with a long, braided beard, watched her, his eyes narrowed. He was the one they called Rat. His gaze was unnervingly sharp. Taking a final shaky breath, Maya let the pen in her other hand slip from her grasp. It clattered onto the linoleum, rolling to a stop right beside Stone's chair, a few inches from his boot. "Oh, shoot," she whispered, the words sounding foreign and weak. She bent down, her movements stiff. The world seemed to slow down, every detail magnified. The scuff marks on Stone's boot, the smell of rain and old leather from his jacket, the low hum of the vending machine down the hall. Rat's unblinking stare. Her hand reached for the pen. As her fingers closed around it, her other hand, the one holding the note, moved toward the jacket. Her palm was sweating. She prayed the tiny paper wouldn't stick to her skin. With a movement so small and swift she barely registered it herself, she slipped the note into the side pocket of the jacket. Her fingers brushed the cool, supple leather for a fraction of a second. It was done. She stood up, her knees weak. She clutched the pen in her hand like a talisman. She risked a glance at Rat. His eyes were still on her, a flicker of suspicion in their depths. Had he seen? She didn't know. She couldn't afford to wait and find out. She turned and continued her walk to the coffee machine, her back rigid. She could feel his eyes burning into her. She fumbled with a paper cup, her hands shaking so badly she could barely get it out of the dispenser. She pressed the button for black coffee, not because she wanted it, but because she needed to complete the charade. The hot, bitter liquid filled the cup. The smell made her stomach churn. She turned to walk back, forcing herself to take the same path. She passed the waiting room again, her eyes locked straight ahead. She didn't look at Rat. She didn't look at Stone. She made it back to the sanctuary of the nurse's station and leaned against the counter, the hot cup warming her icy hands. Now all she could do was wait and pray. For what felt like an eternity, nothing happened. The minutes stretched out, thin and taut. 5 minutes passed, then 7. Dr. Evans arrived on the floor, smiling and full of energy. He strode over to Albright. "Ready for the transfusion, head nurse?" he asked cheerfully. "Ready as we'll ever be, doctor," Albright replied, handing him the chart. "Patel has the first unit prepped." Maya's blood ran cold. It was happening. They were going to do it. Her desperate, insane plan had failed. Maybe he hadn't found the note. Maybe he'd thrown it away, thinking it was trash. Just as Dr. Evans started walking toward room 304, a movement in the waiting room caught her eye. Stone was getting to his feet. He stretched his massive frame, his back popping audibly even from across the hall. He ran a hand over his tired face, and then, casually, slid his hand into the pocket of his jacket. Maya held her breath. His fingers stopped. His posture changed. The casual stretch was gone, replaced by a sudden, sharp stillness. He pulled his hand out of his pocket. In his large, calloused palm was a tiny white square. He frowned, his brow furrowed in confusion. He looked at the folded paper for a long moment before slowly, deliberately uncreasing it. Maya watched his eyes scan the few words she had written. The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. The grief and exhaustion vanished from his face, replaced by a look of such cold, controlled fury that it made the air feel thin. His jaw tightened. a muscle jumping in his cheek. His eyes, which had been dull with sorrow, now blazed with a dangerous, white-hot light. He didn't shout. He didn't make a scene. He simply turned, his movements lethally precise, and started walking toward the nurse's station. His men, sensing the shift in their leader, rose as one. They didn't follow him. They fanned out, creating a silent, immovable wall of leather that blocked the hallway in both directions. No one was getting in or out. Stone walked directly to the counter, his gaze fixed on Ms. Albright. He ignored Maya completely, as if she didn't exist. He placed the small, crumpled note on the counter between them. "Room 304, he said. His voice was not a yell. It was a low, guttural rumble, like the sound of shifting rock deep underground. It was the calmest, most menacing sound Maya had ever heard. "You and me. Now." Ms. Albright looked from the note to Stone's face, and for the first time Maya saw a crack in her composure, a flicker of fear. "I don't know what this is," she began, her voice brittle, "but you can't interfere with patient care." Stone leaned forward slightly, placing his palms flat on the counter. The gesture was slow, deliberate. "The time for talking is over," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "We're going to go to my wife's room, and you're going to check the blood, or I will tear this hospital apart with my bare hands to do it myself." Dr. Evans, who had paused halfway to the room, hurried back. "What's going on here? Sir, you need to calm down." Stone's head snapped toward the young doctor. "You're coming too," he growled. "You're about to learn something." There was no arguing. The sheer force of his will was a physical presence in the room. Flustered and angry, Miss Albright snatched the note and stormed down the hall toward room 304, Stone and Dr. Evans right behind her. Maya watched them go, her body trembling uncontrollably. She had lit the fuse. Now she could only wait for the explosion. The door to room 304 swung open. A young nurse, Brenda, was already inside, hanging the first correct bag of O-negative blood on the IV pole. The second bag, the A-positive one, sat on the small metal tray beside the bed, waiting. "What is the meaning of this?" Albright demanded, her authority reasserting itself within the confines of the patient room. "We are about to start a life-saving procedure." Stone ignored her. He walked to the tray and pointed a single tattooed finger at the second bag, the one that was next in line. "That one," he commanded, his voice echoing in the small, quiet room. "Check it. Against her." He gestured toward his wife's still form in the bed, an array of tubes and wires connecting her to the beeping machines that were keeping her alive. Dr. Evans picked up the bag, a look of confusion on his face. "Sir, this is the second unit. We haven't even started the first one yet." "Check." "It," Stone repeated, each word a chip of ice. "Ms." Albright let out an exasperated sigh. "This is ridiculous. It's a simple clerical error." She marched over, snatched the bag from Dr. Evans, and held it up next to Sarah's wristband, intending to prove her point and end the absurd confrontation. She read the name on the wristband, Sarah Thorne. She read the MRN 8801-T45. Then her eyes moved to the label on the blood bag in her hand. Her gaze froze. The blood drained from her face, leaving her with a pasty gray complexion. Her mouth fell open slightly. The bag slipped from her suddenly nerveless fingers, and Dr. Evans had to lunge to catch it before it hit the floor. "No," Albright whispered, the word a faint, horrified puff of air. It can't be, but it was, printed in clear black letters on the bag's label. Blood type A positive. Patient ID 8801-T46. It wasn't a typo. It was someone else's blood. A different patient entirely. A patient named Susan Thornton, as they would later discover, in room 406. Dr. Evans looked from the bag to Albright's horrified face, and understanding dawned on him. He looked at Sarah, lying helpless in the bed, and then back at the bag he was holding. He looked like he was going to be sick. "My God," he breathed. "We almost—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Stone said nothing. He just stood there watching Albright's professional arrogance crumble into dust. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the steady, rhythmic beep of Sarah's heart monitor, a rhythm that, moments ago, they had been about to stop forever. The aftermath was swift and chaotic. Albright was immediately suspended, escorted from the floor by hospital security. An urgent call was made to the blood bank, which confirmed the catastrophic mix-up. The correct second unit of O-negative blood was located and rushed to the ICU. The hospital's chief of staff came down personally to apologize to Stone, his face pale and his hands shaking. Through it all, Stone remained a silent, watchful presence. He oversaw the correct transfusion himself, not leaving his wife's side until the last drop of life-saving blood had entered her veins and her vitals had begun to stabilize. Maya, meanwhile, had hidden herself in a small, dark supply closet, her back pressed against the cool metal shelves. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving her a boneless, trembling wreck. She slid down to the floor, wrapped her arms around her knees, and finally let the tears come. Tears of terror, of stress, of overwhelming, gut-wrenching relief. She didn't know how long she sat there before the door creaked open. A massive silhouette filled the doorway, blocking out the light from the hall. It was Stone. She flinched, trying to make herself smaller. He didn't enter the closet. He just stood there looking down at her. His face was unreadable in the dim light. "You," he said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a question. Maya could only nod, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. He was silent for a long moment. He looked at her, this small, terrified woman huddled on the floor, and he looked back down the hall toward his wife's room. When he spoke again, his voice was different. The hard, angry edge was gone, replaced by something rough and heavy with emotion. "They told me what would have happened," he said, if I hadn't gotten that note." He took a step into the closet and knelt down, a difficult, creaking motion for a man his size. He was now at her level. "What's your name?" "Maya," she whispered. He nodded slowly. He reached out, and for a terrifying second, she thought he was going to hurt her. Instead, his large, calloused hand came to rest gently on her shoulder. The weight of it was immense, a solid, grounding presence. "Maya," he repeated, testing the name. "You saved her. When no one else listened, you did something." He looked her directly in the eyes. "The Iron Hounds. We don't forget things like that. Ever." He stood up, filling the doorway again. "Go home. Get some rest. You're done for the night." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Maya alone in the quiet dark, the heavy warmth of his hand still lingering on her shoulder. Ms. Albright was fired the next day. An investigation revealed a pattern of cutting corners and bullying junior staff into silence. She lost her nursing license and was never heard from again. Months later, Sarah Thorne walked out of the hospital, leaning on her husband's arm. She was weak, but she was alive. Maya was there to see her off. Sarah pulled her into a fierce, tearful hug. "Thank you," she whispered. "You're my angel." Maya was promoted, given a position on the hospital's new patient safety committee. Her quiet, observant nature was suddenly seen as a strength, not a weakness. 1 year after the incident, Maya was walking to her car late at night after a long shift. The hospital parking lot was dark and mostly empty. She put the key in the ignition and turned. Nothing. Just a sick, clicking sound. She tried again. Nothing. She slumped against the steering wheel, exhausted and frustrated. Suddenly, a series of low rumbles filled the air. Headlights flooded her car. A half-dozen motorcycles had pulled into the spots around her, boxing her in. Her heart leaped into her throat, but then she saw the man dismounting from the lead bike. It was Stone. He walked to her window and tapped on the glass. She rolled it down, her heart still pounding. "Problem, Doc?" he asked, a ghost of a smile on his face. He'd taken to calling her that. "My car won't start," she said, feeling foolish. "Pop the hood." She did. He and two of his men spent the next 20 minutes tinkering in the dark. There was a quiet curse, the clank of a tool, and then, when Stone signaled for her to try again, the engine roared to life. He leaned back down to her window. "You're all set," he said. He looked at her, his expression serious. "I told you we don't forget. You ever have a problem, any problem at all, you call me. Car trouble, landlord issues, anything. You're family now. You're under our protection." 5 years later, the proof of that promise stood on a corner in the city's toughest neighborhood, the Iron Hounds Community Clinic. It offered free and low-cost medical care to those who couldn't afford it. It was clean, well-stocked, and run by its head nurse and director, Maya Patel. An anonymous benefactor had provided all the funding. Maya never asked who it was. She didn't have to. The clinic was an oasis. No one bothered it. The local gangs gave it a wide berth. The dealers stayed off that block. Everyone knew it was protected by the Iron Hounds. They weren't security guards, they were just around. A bike parked across the street, a quiet nod from a man in a leather vest. Their presence was a shield. Sarah Thorne, fully recovered and vibrant, worked alongside Maya as the clinic's administrator. She managed the chaos with a warm smile and an iron will, her laughter echoing in the halls. The two women who had been brought together by a moment of crisis were now inseparable, bound by a debt that had transformed into a deep, familial love. One warm summer evening, the Iron Hounds threw their annual barbecue at their clubhouse on the edge of town. Maya was the guest of honor, as she was every year. She sat at a long picnic table, surrounded by loud, laughing bikers who treated her with a mixture of reverence and affection. Stone, his arm around Sarah, stood up and raised his bottle of beer. The entire yard went quiet. "To Maya," he said, his voice booming across the lawn. He looked right at her, his eyes filled with a gratitude that had not faded with time. "To the quiet ones, the ones who pay attention when no one else is, the ones who have the courage to whisper the truth when everyone else is shouting lies." Every man and woman in that yard raised their drink. "To Maya," they roared, the sound a testament to the ripple effect of a single, terrifying choice. One person, one moment of courage, one little note that had not only saved a life, but had built a sanctuary, forged a family, and proven that the most powerful heroes are often the ones you'd never notice, until they're the only hope you have left. Heroes don't always wear capes or carry shields. Sometimes they wear scrubs and have trembling hands. If you believe that one person's courage can change the world, hit that like button and share this story. You never know who might need to be reminded that their voice, no matter how quiet, matters. Thanks for watching.